The Things We All Carry is a podcast about first responders and their stories surrounding trauma on the job. The intention of this podcast is to raise awareness and share meaningful conversation around a subject often viewed as taboo or simply ignored. Be aware this content may be graphic and it is real. It may not be suitable for children or adults triggered by this subject matter.
Hey guys, welcome back to The Things We All Carry. This week, one word has kind of been on my mind. It's kind of been a theme throughout some of my discussions this week with people either in my life or people that are on the show, amongst other things. It's the word grief, and it's something that I've talked about quite a bit on the show. I mean, after experiencing my mom's the loss of my mom, I talked about it. But what I haven't talked about is this sense that sometimes it's time to tamp down the grief and to kind of like, you kind of feel it when you go out, you feel it when you interact with people and they're like, okay, we get it. You had loss, but it's time to kind of move on. And I guess the theme of what I'm experiencing this week is, hey, listen, we all experience grief in different ways, and we all heal from grief in different ways. And our timelines are all different. They're all completely different. And the interesting thing to me, the fascinating thing is grief isn't this. Grief is waves. It's not a straight line. It's ups and downs and ins and outs and twists and turns. And you're going along just fine one day, and then you hear something and you get waylaid. It'll knock you off your feet, just like, wow, where did that come from? And then you realize, no, that's still grief. That's still grief, because I just saw, the other day I picked up a couple of books that were on my table, and one of them happened to be a book that was sent to me anonymously a couple of years ago, about a year and a half ago. And when I say it was sent anonymously, at first I didn't know who it was, but then of course I realized it's another one of those books that my mom sent me to read that she had no explanation for, and it was just kind of humorous, and it was, nobody else would have sent me this book. And so I knew it was her. I have yet to read it, and I picked it up and it hit me like, oh man, this is one of the last gifts I've got from her. And it kind of shakes you to your core at times. Last couple of weeks ago, I went down with Kenny Mitchell to Operation Yellow Tape, and one of the speakers there was a woman that goes by the name Grief Coach Lynn. And Lynn lost her son to suicide. He was a firefighter in Maryland, and he committed suicide. And her battle after that has been to, as she puts it, heal out loud. And when she was talking about healing out loud, it was impactful, because I didn't do enough of that. I did some of that here, and I did some of that with friends, but I haven't been as vocal as I probably should have been about things that are going on in here, in my heart and in my head. Like I say, grief is weird. I lost my father back in 2013. Now, granted, he and I didn't have a great relationship. It was very tenuous and very rocky, but his death was kind of an overnight thing, and the grief hit me completely differently. My mom's was a protracted battle with cancer, and it was building up to it. And I thought in my head, oh, I've got it. I can deal with this because I've had 4 years of dealing with it and trying to come to an acceptance. That's not true. It's not true. Grief doesn't play along with you. You play along with grief, and you deal with grief as it comes to you. And so that's what I'm doing. I went through some things. I was telling a friend about my mom's birthday celebrations, and for a few years now, we'd been having her dress up, and we had her be a princess one year. We were dinosaurs, superheroes, pirates. It was all kinds of things, and it was all in good fun. She was a great sport. She loved it. We loved it. It was just a chance for, that family togetherness and bonding. And I was going through some of the old pictures, and man, it kind of broke me down. I miss her, and I need to talk about that more. I need to express it more. I need to allow myself to know that it's okay to still miss. It's okay to still hurt. And I don't think I've allowed myself to do that. I haven't I haven't allowed myself to be very open about how much it still hurts. And I talked to our guest today. She mentions that her leadership wasn't ready for her grief. She came back from a family tragedy and her leadership wasn't ready. They didn't know how to handle her grief. And she also, like Lynn was saying, hey, this is me, it's part of me. I'm bringing this along with me. So figure it out. Let's figure out how to do this. And it hit me that that's an important part of leadership. You know, you can be a great fire ground officer or a great platoon leader or whatever you are, but you have to know the human side. You have to be able to relate to the human side of people, because you are, at the end of the day, dealing with humans. You're not dealing with firefighters. You're dealing with humans who are firefighters, and they have very, very human emotion, and they have very human experiences going on around them, inside and outside of work. As Kenny Mitchell would say, outside that yellow tape. So grief has been on my mind, and it's, as much as I like to think I have things together in my brain, I don't. I'm still dealing with it. I'm still scrambling and finding my way to be whole and accept that, yeah, it's time to heal out loud. And so I'm more than willing to talk grief with anybody. If, grief of losing a family member, losing a job, retiring is actually a form of grief as well. There's so many, even pet. Let's not even talk about pets. Oh my God, pets will bring you down to earth like crazy. That's some of the roughest experiences ever, is to lose a pet. But I think we need to be able to in a way celebrate grief, because you know what? That grief, and I wonder what the correlation is, but that grief has got to be related to the amount of love that you experience from a person. And that makes total sense to me. My mom was my rock. She was my superhero. She was that driving force in my life for so many years. And so to lose that was hurtful. It brings on a lot of that feeling of grief. Even though I came to a good amount of peace for her death before she died, I still am feeling the effects of it. So I guess my message is to you is, hey, listen, we experience loss, we experience pain, but celebrate what you had that brought that feeling to you. So celebrate the love, celebrate that relationship you had that brought the grief upon when that person passed away, or when you walked away from that job, or whatever it was. Make sure you celebrate the good times, celebrate the grief, sit with that grief, feel it, tell people about it. Don't be quiet about it. Do not suffer alone. Do not suffer quietly. Bring it out loud, put it in people's faces. And if they're uncomfortable, it might not be the person for you, and that's okay. You're going to find that person that's going to be willing to listen. I guarantee you will find that person that's willing to listen. Call me. I'm willing to listen. I've said it again and again. Call me. I'm willing to listen. I don't want people suffering these emotions alone. It's not worth it, and it's too dangerous. It is way too dangerous. Let's grieve out loud. Let's be sad out loud. Let people know, and so we can start to move past it and start to heal. This is episode 135 of The Things We All Carry. Today I have Jamie. Jamie is from an organization called The Battle Within. She's the clinical director of The Battle Within, and that's an organization out in the Kansas City area. And I am going to actually read something to you so I actually get it right. I'll tell you what their story is, kind of, and what they're doing. It's now I lost it for a second. Their mission is to break down barriers and provide all veterans and first responders the mental and behavioral health support they need. And how do they do it? They have a safe space to experience an awakening, and what they call to walk in freedom, to live lives of authentic, deep connection in your community, to maintain healthy relationships at home and in the workplace. And so what they're doing is their goal is to help any of us who have been in those jobs where when duty calls, you can't say no. And the barrier, what they're saying is that barrier is us, and it's within us. So they say, we understand that sometimes the biggest barrier is yourself. So another snippet from their website says, the Battle Within, an organization formed by men and women who have served, who have been there, who know what it's like to give, return, and readjust. We've felt the exhaustion. We've seen our home lives change. We have walked in recovery. Our mission is to promote mental health in the lives of people. Our mission is to promote mental health in the lives of people who have continually been thrust into extraordinary circumstances. So listen, this is a great organization. One of my former guests has been has been part of this and has spent the week with them and had nothing but positive things to say. He raved about it. You can go check them out on their website, battlewithin.org. And, you know, if you need something, reach out to people, reach out to me, reach out to something like the Battle Within, the Center of Excellence, whatever it is. We have resources. That's the issue. We're not using the resources all the time. The Battle Within isn't going to charge you a dime. They're going to ask you to fly to them, but after that, they're going to take care of you. It is a free service when you get there. Reach out if you need help. Talk to somebody like this. Talk to the Center of Excellence. Find out what's available for you. And if you can't find what's available for you, call me. I will help you find what's available for you. So you guys sit back, take a listen. Let me know what you think. As always, reach out to me. And then get out there and do something for yourself. A quick reminder to please help us build a community which not only recognizes, but supports each other through the struggles and recovery. Reach out through Instagram at The Things We All Carry, or email mystory@thethingsweallcarry.com to offer support and share your story. Please remember to leave a review on iTunes and give a shout out to any first responder you know, love, or care about. Y'all enjoy the show.
Button is which. I'm going to try something real quick, see if it'll record. So if you give me a couple of seconds, let me do this real quick. Welcome back to The Things We All Carry. Today, I have the pleasure and the honor of talking to Jamie from the Battle Within. And the Battle Within is an organization in Kansas. And we had a brief discussion about where exactly, and she's going to explain it to you. But she's joining us from what lake did you say?
Lake of the Ozarks.
Lake of the Ozarks. and that's the Missouri side of Kansas, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And just to be... I just read a blurb. Basically, it's the Battle Within. It's their mission statement. And then I'll throw it over to Jamie and let her explain and kind of tell you who she is and where she came from and how she got to where she is today. So the Battle Within, their mission statement is to break down barriers and provide all veterans and first responders the mental and behavioral health support they need. So that's a simple statement, but that's a mouthful as well, isn't it, Jamie?
It definitely is. It's a simple statement, and it's a lot of work it's a lot of work for the veteran and first responder to come through our program and really make those changes. So yeah, it's actually the mission statement. I read that myself. I wasn't looking for a job when the Battle Within came calling, and I read their mission statement. I was like, oh, I'm going to have to take this job. So
obviously there's a reason why you decided to get into what you're doing and to this job specifically. And let's, we're going to start with your background, your history, but let's first start with some music. What's the last song you listened to?
Oh, the last song I listened to. Oh, this is such a trick question because I listen to a lot of music all the time. So randomly, on my phone, I'm going to look right now really quick because it came up and I was like, why is this song coming on My Love by Justin Timberlake featuring T.I. I have no idea why it started playing, but yeah, that's the last song I listened to.
So your phone tricked you into that one.
Yeah, I feel like it did.
All right.
It did.
So where'd you grow up, Jamie?
I grew up in Kansas City on the Missouri side.
Okay. And
born and bred.
Born and bred. All right. So what was childhood life like? What was growing up like? What was your family like? And anything you want to share with us about that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like my family life was fairly, normal, if you will. Like, have, I grew up with my parents. My dad actually adopted me when I was 3. My mom is my biological mom, but he's my dad. I don't know any other dad, and so I grew up with them. I have a brother who's he would say much younger than me, but a few years younger than me. And we grew up with surrounded by a large family. My cousins were really more like my siblings. We did everything with our large family. They're all from the Kansas City area, and so really just I feel like I said, a fairly normal childhood, if there is such a thing. Playing outside, doing all the things that I feel like kids of our generation did, right?
Yeah, and you're right there. I mean, there is a swing in how kids play today, if you could even say that kids play today. I mean, it's a rare thing when kids are outside as opposed to sitting around on a phone or a video game.
For sure, for sure. Even with my own kids, it was like it was a shift, and I was like, "No, y'all are going outside to play." So,
I think COVID made that so much worse too because we isolated these teens and preteens away from their peers, and they these almost these formative years where they're learning how to communicate and interact with their peers, and they lost that chunk. And so now what they do know about communication and interaction is internet based.
yeah, it's interesting. I have a story about that, but that's maybe for another day or maybe not. I don't know, but I do feel like that some of that was actually helpful for my son during COVID because he knew how to build relations with folks virtually, and I've learned through some of my own experiences and my own trauma that those some of those relationships are better than those in person relationships. They're pretty powerful that these kids are building with folks.
Well, that's a really solid point because yeah, just because you're in person doesn't mean it's healthy. And
Yeah,
vice versa, obviously, but you're right. It doesn't automatically mean it's a healthy relationship just because it's in person.
yeah, yeah, for
So
sure,
you
for
mentioned it
sure.
there. You mentioned your own trauma. What's your background? What's your story then?
Yeah. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I spent a lot of my career, most of my career, really working in community mental health centers here in the Kansas City area. Started working with women who were addicted to drugs and alcohol at a residential program where they could bring their kids into the program. I tell folks that I feel like I started that career not being trained on any of the things that I was going to need to know to be able to do that career. Like I had no clue about because I feel like I grew up in a very fairly sheltered environment. I had no clue about the impact of trauma, and so really from the time I started doing my work, um, that that became central to my learning. Like I didn't learn what I needed in school. I had to educate myself. I had to figure out how I could help folks with that. I spent about 11 years working with in that setting with women and their families, and then switched over to working on the behavioral health side, more the mental health side of it, at another community mental health center, where I quickly saw the same themes of the trauma and the impact on mental health and wellness and whatnot. And while I was there, this idea around trauma informed care, trauma informed practices started emerging, and I started reading about it. And by that time, I'd been in management for a long time, and I'd lost employees, I'd lost people because of the secondary trauma that they were experiencing in this work that we were doing every day. And so I became really a champion for trauma informed practices and implementing that into the place that I was working at the time. That the whole idea around trauma informed practices is not just the clients that we serve, but it's us that are doing the work. How do we take care of ourselves? How do we attend to our own traumas that we've experienced in our personal lives, as well as, in the work that we're doing, seeing, witnessing, hearing stories on a daily basis. And so I just really became invested in creating trauma informed spaces. And so I was doing that work, and actually, um, when my life changed profoundly 7 years ago. 7 years ago, I have two boys, Jake and Zane, and my oldest son, Jake, was murdered by one of his friends 7 years ago. And so, when that happened, it I'm not the same person.
Of course
I'm not
not.
the same person that I was 7 years ago. But also because I knew what I knew, if that it makes sense. Like I was already doing the work. I saw all these systems that did not know how to take care of my family, did not know how to take care of Jake's friends, did not know how to take care of Zane, my younger son, did not know how to take care of my colleagues, um, did not my did not know how to take care of the first responders who were directly impacted. Quite frankly, my cousin at the time, he was a police officer for um uh the Kansas City KCPD, and my husband and I were out of town when my son was killed, and my cousin had to identify my son's body. Um, I mean, just these things that were just coming up for me as I was dealing with my own trauma led me to really think about how I could do more, if you will. And so I actually left the organization I was with after I stayed there for about a year. And then I started doing some consulting, coaching, really trying to get into systems to change them, to help them to learn how to take better care of trauma survivors and take better care of themselves if they were doing the work. And then like a year and a half ago, like I said, I wasn't looking for a job. I was enjoying this owning my own schedule
Yeah.
and doing this consulting, when the battle within, what presented itself to me, and I couldn't say no because I come from a family of veterans and first responders. I've seen the impact firsthand, and there was something about um, being present and holding space for folks in that different setting that I couldn't resist.
Well, before we get into battle within, let me ask you a question about the systems. And
Yeah.
I've got a pretty good idea of what you're discussing there, but what do you mean by the systems weren't prepared for the different groups of people that were touched by your son's murder?
Yeah, for sure. So, I'll start with my own work system. So I was the lead in integrating trauma informed practices into our work. But when I returned back to work, uh, leaders were clearly uncomfortable with my trauma. Were clearly uncomfortable with my story. I saying my son's name I would get a visual response from people who just didn't know what to do with me, and I'm like, this grief is coming with me. Like, I don't. There's nothing else I know to do with it, but bring it along my side. And so, um, you know, um, that's one system that was profoundly like shocking to me. The school systems, Zane going back into school. There were some really amazing teachers and administrators there who really tended to him and his needs. But there were also administrators and teachers who would say to me, "Now, why do we need to give him special accommodations?"
Mhm.
And I'm like, "Well, I mean, we were on the news, like,
Right.
my story. There's no mystery as to what's going on here."
At the time, what
Um,
was his age at the time?
he was 15.
Okay. So, yeah,
He was 15. Jake was 17 and he was 15.
I mean, 15's a tough age with nothing going on, let alone
Right?
losing your brother to a violent act.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, the very first indicator to me that this was probably not gonna go well was actually, when we were planning the funeral, and I asked the school if we could do the dinner afterwards, at the school, because I knew there would be a lot of kids there, and I knew, like, the school would be a safe place for them, and, I was told no because we needed to keep the grief out of the school. And I
Sorry.
was like,
Yeah, yeah,
"What?"
because you just checked that at the door. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I
That's
was like,
asinine.
yeah, like, these are where all the kids are gonna remember
Exactly.
I mean, this is where they know Jake from, so there was no checking it at the door, there. But yeah, so, and just example after example of the kids who really were Jake's closest friends that I knew, and I again, just the blessing was that I already knew I knew enough about trauma to know these kids are gonna struggle, and so I gave them a list of the names. I was like, "These kids are gonna have a bad year. What are you gonna do to tend to
Right.
them?" And for the kids then to come to my house and tell me what was happening and how the school was not tending to them, it was just one disappointment after another in regards to that.
So you're able to
You know,
recognize that the systems are failing people around you, but are you able to
also take care of yourself at the same time?
Yeah, and no.
Yeah.
Um, I think the advantage to me was that I got through those first few months um, because I understood what was happening to my brain. Um, I I understood what was happening to the people around me in a way that most people don't have that advantage. Like my poor husband, I remember in the days after we lost Jake, I said to him, well, we're not going to get a divorce over this. And he was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, well, statistically speaking, we're at higher risk now um, for divorce. This is just something I knew because
Right.
of the work that I did, right? But he's just looking at me like, this is what we're going to talk about
Yeah.
today. And you're like, really? um, but it was that knowledge though that I think helped me through what has been very, very challenging times in my relationships because um, child loss is hard. Child loss by, your kid being murdered is honestly, I can't imagine much worse. So, um, definitely I had those advantages, but also I'm human and my brain, definitely is in charge. And, some days are better than others. I'm grateful for the skills that I've really learned since losing Jake that has helped me, to be able to heal and to be well.
Hey guys, quick break right here just to check in and thank each of you for listening to the show. Your support has been paramount, and I appreciate all of you. I have one request, though. I need you to share the show with everyone you know. Help me get the word out and spread these stories as far and as wide as we can. While you're at it, please leave a review of the show wherever you happen to listen. Feel free to reach out to me at any time to share your story, to talk, or to pass on suggestions. Let's get on with the rest of the show. The thing that came to mind when you were speaking was, I think the question I had was, you had this professional set of skills, and you had this, like you said, you knew the statistics, you knew this, you knew that, but then you had to have brought in your own personal learning and integrated that into the professional set. Am I correct?
For sure, for sure. So the interesting thing about the role I was in and teaching people about trauma informed practices and teaching them to take good care of themselves. I'm not proud of it, but I'm going to be the first to tell you. Like I would talk to them about the importance of mindfulness,
Mhm.
meditation, breathing, taking time out, all the things that I was not tending to myself. Uh, and then I had to, like, if I'm going to survive, I'm going to need to figure out
Yeah.
how to take better care of my brain and my body. And so the advantage was I knew those things. The disadvantage was I wasn't practicing a lot of those things that I was talking about and teaching about.
Do you find that people find out you're a licensed practitioner and they think that, oh, well, she's got it together?
Um, it sometimes yes. So my story I don't tell to everyone, first of all. So, but those that knew me, I think I'll say this: I feel like people know me because I'm a mom first,
Yeah.
even though I've been a social worker for a long time. My most important role is a mother, is a wife, is a friend. And so um, I try and be really authentic about how hard it has been for the last 7 years. I try and do that with everyone. So the people that come through our program, um, the the people that like I'm not going to hide behind the fact that I'm a social worker, because my brain functions just the same as your brain, and this hurt just as bad,
Yeah.
and it changed me just as significantly. So I feel like that probably they maybe feel that way for like a second until I tell them what a shit show my life is, and they're like, "Oh, she is human." Okay.
Well, join the club. Everyone's life is a shit show in some manner.
Right.
Yeah. If they're telling you it's not, they're probably lying about something. So whatever.
I say the same. I feel the same.
So what brings you to the battle within, and what the hell is the battle within?
Yeah. So So again, like the Battle Within is a program that was started by over 100 veterans and first responders. Um, they that came together. There's kind of been some different programs that came before the Battle Within that that it just came to a point where the folks who started it said, we need to start our own. We need to put into practice some of the things that we think are missing, improve the program essentially. So that was started by our executive director, Justin Hoover. He's a veteran himself. Our clinical manager, um, Adam, he's a veteran, but he's also a licensed professional counselor, and he is the person who developed the curriculum, which I'll talk about. And so that was kind of the core of how it started, was just people who have had the experience saying, how can we help? How can we do more for our veterans and first responders? Um, so we have two primary programs. You want me to jump in and talk about that right now? Is
Well,
this
yeah, let's do that, or how you found your way to it. However you want to tell this story, it's your story. I'll let you run with it.
Yeah, I'll share how I got there first, and then I'll talk about the
Perfect.
program. So as I said, after I left the community mental health center, I was doing my own consulting and coaching, and going into organizations, and including law enforcement, going to CIT trainings, and teaching about the impact of trauma. And some of that was just telling my story, and helping them relate to, like, um, as as first responders, here's some things you need to know, like how my story impacted me, but also how it impacted my family directly, with my cousin who was a first responder, and just sharing those pieces. And along the healing journey, I'll tell you that I've met some really amazing people. I feel like Jake sends them to me at the right time. So one of those folks is the therapist that works with all three of us, and my husband, my son, and I. She's certainly a gift that we didn't anticipate on this journey, and she also happens to be the clinical advisory board for the Battle Within. And so she was meeting with me, and she's like, by the way, this organization that I'm working with has a new position that they're creating, and you just might want to check it out. And that was all she gave me. And so that's all I needed to get to where I'm at today. So, just again, the mission statement that you read at the beginning, when I clicked on their website and I saw that, um, I really loved a lot of things about it. But as I really dug into it, one of the things that appealed to me is that while therapy is a vital part of the healing process, and it's emphasized throughout the program, it's also recognizing that there's alternative ways that we can heal, that it's not a straight and narrow road that says I have to go to therapy every week. Like,
Right.
yes, I need to do that, but also there's all these other things I can be doing for myself. Um, which is what I've learned over the last few years, is like, I need to be pulling in all these other resources that can help me to heal. So that's what really appealed to me, and why I applied and ended up joining the team. Um,
So, what are the pieces of the battle within? What you said there you said it yourself. There are different ways to heal. It would not just, and I'll use the term talk therapy. It doesn't do it for everybody. So, what is it about the battle within that can reach out to people, reach out to first responders and veterans, and help?
yeah, for sure. So we have two primary programs, and then we have a third program that I'll mention briefly that we're bringing on right now. It's fairly limited to just the Missouri, Kansas City area. But definitely the program that kind of started it all, and the reason that the Battle Within exists, is the Revenant Journey. And that's our 5-day intensive program where folks come on site with us. We have a partnership with a, a local church camp that is a lovely partnership. We share space with them. But folks come in and they join us on a Monday, and we jump right in on Monday with I'm like, don't come in and expect to rest, because we only get you for 5 days. You're going to be really busy during that 5-day program. So the program has a few different goals, but the whole premises of it is that we want to give you enough skills so that when you leave us at the end of the week, you have what you need to continue your journey, to continue doing the work. And we do it in a way that's very holistic, that teaches lots of different skills along the journey. So, for example, day one, folks come in, and the first thing that we do is we have different providers who are experts in different areas that come in and teach different sections. And so, day one, we have a police officer who was 25 years active and has been retired for 8 years, who realized he needed to do something for his brain, and so he became certified in several different uh, uh, mindfulness programs, and so he teaches across the area, and he comes in and teaches a 2-hour course on mindfulness and meditation to start the week off. But really focuses in on the brain, like helping to normalize what's happened to your brain as a result of experiencing the on the job trauma. But probably, as you know, once you start digging into your trauma, most um, veterans and first responders recognize that trauma started long before that
Yeah.
they started doing the work,
Right.
right? Yeah. So we do that. We start with that, teaching that, and then every day we practice it. So every day in the schedule, we have somebody who comes in and teaches yoga every morning. They start their mornings with yoga, and then we do another section of meditation as they end their day. So they're practicing those skills that they
Hmm.
have been taught during the week. Tuesdays, then we have what I would consider kind of the one day that's more like traditional group therapy, if you will, where we help folks to really recognize what brought them to the battle within, and recognize how they're really feeling about being in that state of distress that brought them there. One of the really key things that I want to say about that, because just the idea of talking about stuff can be really scary for people who've never done it before. Our job and our role is not to have them tell us every terrible thing that's ever happened to them. And in fact, we do not want that to happen. And we will stop if that's where the path we go down. Our whole role and job is to help them learn how to contain, so that they can start to process their stuff, but also be well and be able to reconnect with their family, reconnect with their coworkers. That there's not an expectation that we're going to solve everything in 5 days. We're going to just slowly start to teach you how to do the work. So we do that, and then we have providers who come in and teach about emotional regulation, skills around like things like reframing. How do we stay present when our body wants to go someplace else? How do we do all the things with that? We have a trainer who comes in and teaches nutrition and exercise. Wednesday, we do a lot around ceremony as well. So when I speak about alternative ways of healing, the other thing that we really want to do is honor that we can release things in really non-traditional ways, uh, that are. If you ever have the chance to talk with Adam, our clinical manager, when he developed the program, he really focused a lot on the warrior's journey home, if you will, and how in you know for centuries we would honor heroes as they would go off to battle and as they would come home, but that has gotten lost in our society and in our communities. And so it's really about how do we transform that. And so we do some work around a fire, and then we do a ropes course as a part of that. All clinician led though, so it's not like you just go to the ropes course and have fun and
Right.
get an adrenaline rush. We want to teach you that it's not normal to always have an adrenaline
Hmm.
rush when you do these things. Um, So we do that. We have equine therapy. One morning, we have a licensed marriage and family therapist who comes in and spends a large chunk of the afternoon on Thursday talking about family of origin stuff, but then also current family situations. How do we repair? How do we go back into our family system
Mhm.
when we've learned this work, but our families aren't with us. And while we feel changed, they may not be
Right.
ready to forgive and move forward yet. And then we do a little more ceremony on Friday and we have a graduation. So that's kind of the key components of the program. The other piece that's really important is the community that's built within the program. Um, so we start with day one by dropping the dirty word of vulnerability
You're gonna strike fear into everybody's heart.
right away, right away, right away. Um, so, and I mean, as you know, being vulnerable in this line of work can get you killed.
Yeah.
It can get other people killed, and so for folks to come in and hear us say, "Well, we're going to be vulnerable this week," um, can be a little bit terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we want to normalize that right up front. We really want to talk about there's a difference between keeping yourself safe on the job that you do and then being vulnerable in your settings with in your personal relationships with your coworkers. Being vulnerable isn't going out for a beer after I get off of a really hard shift um, and drinking it up. That doesn't count. So really we start having that conversation right from the beginning about what it's going to mean to practice that. You have this 5-day setting to be safe where you can lean into this process and see what happens um, while we tend to you essentially. Um, and then we have mentors who are alumni, who are graduates of the program who come back. For me, this is like the backbone of the program. This is the thing that I really just love about the way the Battle Within um, um, that week, how it goes in the Revenant Journey. So our alumni are actually the folks who stay the night. The staff doesn't stay the night. It's our alumni who stay the night with the men or women who are going through. They run the evening programming, so obviously the evening program is not clinically based. All the day programming is clinician led, but then the evening programming is really led by the mentors and just this unique opportunity to show the folks going through the program this is what healing can look like. This is what it can feel like
Mhm.
after um, you've been through the program. I don't even ask them to come back until after they've been out for 6 months. And then I vet them to make sure that they've really been doing the work before they come back. And so they really are that example to these folks coming through. Like this does work if you do the things, if you practice the things that you learned during this week, um, you will find joy again. It happens. And so that's to me, like I said, that is the backbone. That is what um, I think the thread the common thread that ties it all together.
And with the revenant portion of your services, how do you measure success? What's success for you guys?
So we do a lot of pre-assessment and post-assessment for folks coming through. And so we really are mindful that we measure it using tools that are well vetted tools. So like we have them do the masculine behavior scale. We have them do the PHQ-9. Like there's specific instruments that we use for success, if you will. Um, knowing that 5 days you're going to leave feeling better, but also you're not going to leave healed. And so
Right.
we do those assessments at 3 months, 6 months, a year, and then we send it out every year after that to all of our alumni. So we're getting ongoing data afterwards. And all of those skills, I'll tell you, continue to improve um, over time. There's generally a huge increase during that the first post
Yeah.
assessment that they do, and then there's always a little drop off, which we would expect. Like you come out with this, woohoo, everything's amazing, and then you realize life still goes
Yeah.
on. There's still challenges, but then that the scores just continue to level out and improve in each of those instruments. We don't have a timeline on what that's going to look like, or like what success looks like, if you will. Knowing that healing is an ongoing journey.
Yeah. And I know that you, I don't think that I don't think I'm betraying anybody if I mentioned, my former guest who was a participant in your program, it was, Travis is from that area, and he had so many good things to say about it and his experience with you guys. And if you take the word of your people that were involved in it, it's a success.
Yeah,
And
for sure. I think that the testimonials afterwards, that's where I think. I mean, of course, I'm a social worker, so I'm touchy feely, and that's where where the appeal is for me. But I mean, it is something when you sit in there on a Monday and you see a group of men or women who are. I mean, you can just look at them and feel hopelessness. You can look at them and feel like this is it. This is my last chance. And then through that process of just 5 days of somebody honoring their story, of somebody holding space for them. These are things that don't often happen for our veterans and first responders, not authentically.
yeah.
Um, that um, when Friday, when you sit in graduation and you look at them and you see hope, um, I think that there's no better testament than that. Um,
S-
so many stories of folks saying, like, my wife was going to leave me, my husband was done with me, I was going to lose my job, I was this, I was that. And then to hear them come back and mentor 6 months later, and you're like, wow, pretty amazing change.
So if somebody's out there listening and they say, "Man, 5 days, that's nothing. I can do that in instant." That's achievable compared to some of these inpatient programs where they're thinking 30, 40 days. And I know that it's kind of a different metric there because you're giving tools and you're not I don't want to say not really, but you're giving tools and you're not trying to heal in that process of that 5 days. You're trying to give those tools so they can heal as they go.
Yeah.
So how does somebody get involved with it?
Yeah, so it's really easy. Our application is online on our website, thebattlewithin.org. That application is it takes probably maybe 5 minutes to fill out that initial application. You get that submitted, it goes into our system, and then one of our team calls, and we do a little bit deeper clinical interview then to assess a little more detail about um, the reason why you're applying, but also to make sure you're in a stable enough space to be able to attend, if that makes sense. So it doesn't mean you have to have your problem solved, because that is not the goal. It means that if you're drinking heavily every day, I'm going to need you to get some sobriety, because we're not a medical program. We don't have a doctor on staff. Um, I don't need you to have 6 months clean to come through the program. That's not my desire, but I do need to know that you're gonna not have a medical crisis
Yeah.
while you're with me because you haven't drank. And that would defeat the purpose. So we assess for that. We do assess for things like over the phone to make sure that there's not active suicidal um plan. It doesn't mean that people, I mean, many people report like, yeah, I've had thoughts about, I wish I wasn't here, or, if I would just not wake up. Like, that's a normal thing. That is not a deterrent for coming through our program. Um, if you tell me that, you're actively planning it, then I'm going to get you the help that you need for that. So we do a little bit deeper assessment, and to make sure also that you are in a spot that you can be in a group dynamic, because it is all group work. It
Right.
is not individual. And some people just that's a challenge.
So you said this is the main program, and you have a couple others, one that's kind of coming online. So do you want to talk about those real quick?
For sure, I definitely do. I definitely do. So, the Revenant Journey is available for anybody across the country. We have no restrictions on who can come through. If you are a veteran or first responder in the United States, apply for the program. We would love to have you. The next program that we have is the Frontline Therapy Network, and we actually developed that at the beginning of COVID in response to you know, the life that COVID brought
Yeah.
us. Um, so we had a full cohort that was supposed to start in 2 weeks when we were told you can't gather, you can't do anything. And so the Battle Within team quickly, you know, really pivoted and said, how do we get some supports to these veterans and first responders that were scheduled to come to the program? And so out of that was born the Frontline Therapy Network. It's a network of therapists really across the country that we have vetted to make sure they know how to work with veterans and first responders, which is really important. If you're a veteran and first responder and you're listening to this, how many times have I heard at the beginning of a cohort, um, yeah, Jamie, I had a therapist. I saw her once, and when I started telling her my story about what happens to me on the job, she started crying, or shook her head the whole time, and I could just feel like she couldn't hold my
Oh yeah.
story. Um, we don't want that to happen. That defeats the purpose of getting somebody hooked up with a therapist. So it's really important to us that we know that we have skilled clinicians who can um, honor the stories and also help them heal from those stories. So we vet them to make sure they have the experience of working with veterans and first responders, but also that they have the right clinical skills, modalities to do the trauma work as well. Um, so that network is available to anybody who goes through the Revenant Journey. So if you were to come through the Revenant Journey and you didn't have a therapist, even though you don't live in the Kansas City area, we would help to vet a therapist to make sure that they have those skills. For folks who live in the Kansas City, really the Missouri, Kansas area, um, you don't have to go through the Revenant Journey to get that service. You
Gotcha.
can sign up just for the Frontline Therapy Network, and we'll get you hooked up with that. Um, even if you don't live in our area and you sign up for the Frontline Therapy Network, we still refer, we still help give a list of vetted therapists. It's just you won't be through our system. We can cover the first 10 sessions of therapy if needed. So if folks if they don't have insurance, if they have high deductibles, if they are between jobs and so their insurance hasn't kicked in, we match folks with people who take their insurance so that they, again, knowing that 10 sessions is not enough for somebody to really heal from their trauma. But so we want them to be able to continue with somebody who takes their insurance. So that's an option. And then our other program is it's called Dogs for Valor, and it is a program that trains dogs to be service dogs. Um, I'm always hesitant to even mention it because it is very local. They have to be
Right.
in the Kansas City, Missouri area because it's actually, and you have to have your own dog,
Gotcha.
and they train your dog to be your service
Okay.
animal. So um, but it's kind of hot off the presses because we literally are rolling it out like in the last 4 weeks. We've just partnered with this organization and they're a part of our programs
Well,
now.
growth has to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, you
For
you
sure.
you can't go nationwide right off the bat, so that's understandable.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Well, I think that gives a pretty good overview of what you guys are about and the services you offer. I have one massive question though. Someone signs up and is accepted at Revenant. What's it cost them?
Not one penny.
Cool.
Well, let me say, not except for the travel to get to
Right.
Kansas City. That's the only thing. So most folks who have to travel in, if they have to fly, they fly right into to MCI, the
Hmm.
Kansas City Airport, which is 15 minutes from the camp. We have them fly in on Sunday. We put them up in a hotel Sunday night, and then we pick them up and bring them out to the camp. So the only cost is that whatever that, if it's air travel or driving, many of our folks drive in for it. So
Perfect. That's awesome. Thank you.
yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, let's get to my last two questions I ask everybody. And I gave you a little bit of warning, not too much, but that first one is a moment of awe. What's the last time or a memorable time of a moment of awe, something that just stood out to you that you just sat back and you didn't really have words for?
So since you prepped me for it, I had a chance to think about it. I have lots of moments of awe. I will tell you that I'm a big believer in paying attention to the signs and the things that happen. It's where
Mhm.
I often find my hope. So so I definitely noticed that. So actually this just happened. I shared with you about my son, and actually last week was the anniversary of his death. I don't even like to use the word anniversary
Yeah.
because it sounds like a celebration,
Right.
but it was his death day is June 25th. And so um that day is just a day we try and survive every day. Like I just try and get through it. But Jake has a core group of friends of young men who I adore, who um, I I made it my mission from day one to make sure that they were taken care of, because I know that men's grief is not honored the way it should be. Um, and so, but they're all getting older, right? They're 24, they're 25, and so I've tried to be like, okay,
Right.
don't be that mom to all of them that's in their business all the time, right? So this was the first year that I had really like reached out to them or checked in on them, and that evening, they texted my younger son and said, "Hey, can we come by? We just want to see you guys." And so 3 of his closest friends came by and just sat with us, sat with Zane, and um, that was a moment of awe for me because it was a reminder to me that like my grief is also their grief, and that day is hard for all of us. But also, what a blessing it is to have young men who get it at that age and who show up and are present. Um,
I think that's a rare thing. It goes back to what we talked about, how we've shifted in this country about how we're raised and how we're living. And so I think that's a rare thing, and it is awe-inspiring and it's very honorable.
for sure, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could tell you so many stories about these guys and the things that they've done. We were talking online about, or maybe did we talk about it at the beginning? Or I think we were offline, and we were talking about COVID and video gaming
Yeah.
and things like that. And, one of Jake's very, very best friends, he had never met in person. He was a video gamer,
Oh,
and they
okay.
had been video gaming since he was 8 years old. Um, and uh, and so we had to get on Jake's game to tell
Right.
Garrett, who we knew he was a common name in our house because he was literally Jake's best friend. If he got in trouble,
Hmm.
um, Jake would only be mad because we took his computer away because he couldn't talk to Garrett. Like um, so that relationship and that connection was really so powerful. And Garrett got married this earlier this year, and he honored Jake at his wedding. And again, it's really amazing to see young men doing that. I can't even tell you because I've seen the effects of them not being able to
Yeah.
grieve. So yeah,
I think that's perfect. Thanks.
yeah,
So what about a book? Is there a book you want to share with the audience?
yeah. So I have a couple books. Can I share two?
Of course you can.
Okay, thanks. So one of my favorite books is Finding Meaning by David Kessler.
Okay.
It's actually a book on grief. He worked with Elizabeth Kubler Ross, who developed the 5 stages of
Hmm.
grief. And uh, he he talks about, well, first of all, he really helps explain like that those 5 stages of grief were not meant to be like first this
Yeah.
happens, then this happens. Like that's some weird myth that happened over time with that. So he talks a lot about the messy road of grief. And for me doing this work, like I know my own grief, but also every single person who comes through the battle within has a grief story, whether it just be from things that they've lost about themselves because of the trauma they've experienced. And so I love that book because it honors those stages in a different way. But most importantly, it talks about that's not enough. You also have to find meaning again.
Yeah.
You have to figure out what you're what you're living for, what your goals are. And so that book was just one that really personally um, helped me a lot on my journey, and one that I recommend to a lot of folks that are going through any kind of traumatic journey.
Okay.
So
And number 2?
that's the first one. And the second one is What Happened to You by Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey, actually.
Okay.
So it is, I'm guessing that people have recommended The Body Keeps the
Oh, yeah.
Score on here more than
More
once.
than once,
Yeah.
yeah. Which great. It's a great book for reading about trauma and what it does to a body. And I
Yes.
appreciate
And
it
also,
every time someone says they've read it, especially I appreciate that.
yeah. And also it's a lot. It's a heavy book to read. And if you're not a doctor, you probably have to reread sections a lot of times to fully get it. Um, that's my experience. I'll say that. I had to listen to it. Like I had to find all the
Right.
different ways to get it to sink into this brain of mine that's not medical. But What Happened to You is kind of like the layman's version of
Hmm.
that in my mind, is
Okay.
that it's very real. And Dr. Bruce Perry, he is an expert on childhood trauma, but obviously an expert on trauma. And so the way he explains things, um, I- if I had my book with me, I would show you, like, I have tabs throughout that entire book of like, oh, this, now I get it. This makes sense. This makes sense. So
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate those.
yeah,
I had not heard of either one of them, so I look forward to getting those out there.
yeah, awesome.
Well,
Good.
thank you very much. I've appreciated the conversation, and hopefully you told us what you needed to tell us about the battle within, and hopefully some people will look into it because I think it's a valuable program from, just that word of mouth that I've heard.
For sure. I hope so as well. I am, it's my honor to be able to sit in this space um, and just be a small part of somebody's journey. But that is the way every single one of us who works with the battle within feels, that it is our honor to be a part of um, healing and finding hope again. So I would love to see everyone.
There you go. Well, thank you very much, and you guys keep up the good work out there, and just like I said, keep it up. It's a needed
Thank you.
space. Obviously, we don't have a lot of it.
Not much at all. So thank you so much.
All right, we're out.
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Things We All Carry. Head over to the website, thethingsweallcarry.com, for show notes, resources, and to sign up for the newsletter. Until next week, take care of yourselves and remember to check in on each other.